Yeah, you are listening to Peterborough Politics Podcast with our new introduction music from the Garbageface, a local legend here in Peterborough. Peterborough Politics Podcast is filmed live on Twitch in front of our beautiful studio audience. Chat, please give yourself a round of applause. You really added a lot of character to that intro, and I appreciate you so much for that. We are your hosts. My name is Danny Taro, aka my homie Tutaro, where we are broadcasting this on my Twitch channel. Sebastian, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Sorry, Danny, I think you cut out there.
Oh, Sebastian, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Sebastian Johnston-Lindsay, the coordinating editor of Arthur newspaper. Happy to be here.
And we have, and we have a great show today, because we are featuring our first guest on the podcast, and it is a city
Yes.
councillor, Matt Crowley. Is it Crowley or Crowley or
I've
is
always said
is the
I've always said Crowley. Maybe that should be our
okay?
first question if we're mispronouncing his name. I've
Okay,
heard it
yes,
in council. I
yes.
hear it pronounced Crowley.
Okay, okay, Crowley. All right, we have chat demanding pronouns. We have introduced our pronouns previously, but if you are new to the show, we are he him pronouns as far as I know. We're a
We
he
are
him we're a he him podcast,
he him
just
heavy
like
podcast.
yeah, I know. So showing a lot of gender diversity here. And we have a really exciting show. It's been hard to kind of get news on this week's city council ongoings because Joel Kovac is taking some time off for March break, and they are typically the person who tweets out what goes on at city council meetings, and they do a lot of reporting that we can digest as well. But we have our own special reporter who's on this beat, and that's you, Sebastian.
Yeah, yeah. It was strange being the only member of the press there the other night. Global News didn't show up either, which was interesting because normally they're there with their camera to get some footage, and I thought that was kind of a little bit interesting because this was the night that the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisor Reem Ali was scheduled to come, and as you know, people who follow politics in the city closely, you would know that's been cause for some discussion at City Council over the past month or so. Um, so yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I haven't been able to get an article out about it yet because of everything else that's going on, but I intend to by the end of this week. But yeah, hopefully this will serve as a little teaser of some of the major issues that came up because there was a lot. There was a lot of stuff to talk about.
Okay, just
Yeah.
off the top of your head, like what specifically was going on?
Oh boy. Well, there was a long report concerning bylaw enforcement in the city of Peterborough and certain strategies that might be being brought forward to sort of better enforce certain bylaws. And I mean, I imagine we're going to begin to get into more of the specifics surrounding the specific bylaws that were being amended, because I'm sure those are of interest to some of the people watching. Um, but more or less the lessons that kind of the overarching lessons that kind of come out of this report are that Peterborough kind of finds itself in an interesting like in between space. It's not a small city but not a large city, and so they're struggling to be able to find people or adequately locate the resources to enforce bylaws to the
Right.
degree that certain councillors might wish they were, and these tend to be specific bylaws around property. That's the main frustration here. Yeah.
Okay, so I know bylaw 19075 was part of this, and it's a bylaw that was adopted in 2019 to prohibit overnight camping in parks without a permit. Now, this is obviously a direct bylaw that was created to address people camping in parks and unhoused folks. And part of this new update, as far as I know, is that Peterborough has recently shifted to using contracted private security guards to enforce homeless encampments, which is obviously a bit of a concern, because these contracted private security guards might not be accountable in the way that city staff and city police officers have been. I understand there are maybe some safety issues that can arise when you're trying to evict someone from their tent and steal all their belongings and put them all their belongings into a dumpster. Um, but for me, I suppose I think the solution is, why don't we just get rid of this bylaw, um, so that people can uh, camp in parks because they have nowhere else to go? Or why don't we at least make it so that there is designated space for this situation to be happening? Because it's something that is going to happen. We know it's going to happen. Why don't we designate space and make sure that these people are not going to be policed as a result of them having nowhere to go?
Yeah, and I mean, this goes back to an ongoing conversation. I mean, Al Burke is kind of at the forefront of, I should say, Councillor Al Burke, Town Ward Councillor Al Burke is one of the main proponents of attempting to find alternative solutions to ensuring that people who find themselves in a situation where they're living in an encampment are treated equitably by city staff, but then also the police, should there be any interaction between them, whether that's going and cleaning the encampment, removing trash, or what have you. Whatever interaction between city staff and any manner of enforcement officer that is being carried out equitably and in line with this is also related to the whole notion of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which we'll probably get to later as well. But there's been motions brought forward by Councillor Burke recently to sort of get, like, I think the number that keeps coming up is this. I think it's a little over $3,000 a week that's being spent on the monitoring and enforcement of encampments in the city of Peterborough, and that's being carried out by private security. Recently, I've been talking to Al this morning to try and clarify exactly how long that's been going on, and I haven't received a response to that specific question yet, but I intend on following up more. But he did bring up a motion, I believe it was 2 months ago, to attempt to ask city staff to create a report comparing the relative costs of providing, portable toilet facilities, hand washing facilities, and regular garbage pickup at encampments, as opposed, and then compare that cost for a month to a month of employing private security or sending city workers to regularly interact with and clean up these spaces. Because for a while there, that was happening once a week. I believe it was pretty much every Wednesday. Heavy machinery would roll down to the Wolf Street encampment, and oftentimes right in front of where I find myself right now at Victoria Park, which is of course county space. However, the same sort of idea. I've witnessed it firsthand. The sort of intimidation tactics is really what it comes down to. Not to editorialize too much, but that's kind of what it. When I mean, if any of us people who are privileged enough to have houses, if we were to every Wednesday morning, it's 8 o'clock, we had bulldozers and backhoes and police officers showing up at our front door, I think that we would find ourselves in a situation that we might characterize as being intimidated. However,
It sounds it sounds like intimidation to me. Yeah.
yeah,
And people in chat and myself also want to just clarify that the city is spending $3,330 a week on private security. And as you say, that money could be spent towards providing washrooms, providing garbage collection, providing showers. There's just so many ways that money could potentially be better spent. And Alex Bierk kind of brings up that, more enforcement is not going to resolve this situation.
Yeah, and I mean, this sentiment has been echoed by, like, the chief of police himself, Stuart Betts. Like, when he was presenting his budget to council back in January, he spoke directly to the fact that we're not going to enforce our way out of this problem, right? So I mean, this is a notion that it's not even controversial for the police, right? Like, they see themselves as being able to play some kind of role. What that role is probably differs from what you and I would like to see. However, they do not see them being the sole enforcers of this, right? And I suppose at this point, what Peterborough has decided to do is to employ outside contractors instead of the police to do it, which, like you said, kind of takes away certain degrees of accountability, but I'm not exactly quite sure to what extent.
Right. It seems just very odd to me. If city staff can't do this job, if police can't do this job, what I don't really understand what these new private bylaw officers are going to be able to do to help this situation. Um, Councillor Keith Riel has been quite vocal about this. He said that it might be getting to a point where a special type of bylaw officer
Hmm.
needs to be appointed who is clad in Kevlar armor
Yeah,
in
there
order
was
to safely carry out these duties.
yeah, and this
It,
is something that I've kind of followed up with Councillor Burke as well. Is like because there was a lot of talk about city staff being either physically threatened or intimidated when they were going down to uh, these these places, and I mean that's I don't want to say that that hasn't happened, but it was kind of the first time that this has been brought forward at council in such an obvious way, I suppose is the best way of putting it. I before this, the concerns were not being framed in such a way that city staff were being threatened. So I'm intending to follow up more on that and maybe being able to talk to some people to kind of get a sense of what that means, because at council it wasn't really like to go to talk about like showing up in Kevlar vests like police officers. So like
yeah, I know
I
that's the other thing. It's like
Keith,
we need a special type of
yeah,
officer with a
the,
Kevlar vest. And it's like,
those
wait, you mean like a
a
cop?
police officer.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
that was my
it's
immediate
like,
thought too. Is like those people already
yeah,
exist, Keith. Councillor Riel, I should say we should be
right.
equally respectful for all of their titles.
I guess
But yeah,
we'll try our
I
best.
we'll try our best. I mean, yeah, I'll try not to call them anything other than that. But yeah, we'll
Right.
but like it was kind of interesting, like these people already exist and they're already on like city payroll on the budget. So I suppose what they're anticipating is that if they were to continuously employ the the police to do this, or not that they can direct the police in any significant degree, but if the police are going to continually charge the city for these things, then it's going to go way over their budget, right? And so I perhaps this is the I I can't speak exactly to the difference, but I would imagine that employing like the $3,330 a week is probably cheaper than employing police officers to do the same
Right. I
work.
mean, that is my guess as well. But you know what would be even cheaper? Getting to the root of some of these problems that are causing people to be living in poverty
Now
and be unhoused.
that's crazy talk, Danny.
All right.
You know,
And Alex Burke did try to kind of bring this up at council, and apparently Mayor Jeff Leal stepped in.
yeah. So this was a rare instance of Jeff Leal showing like any emotion other than like calm. He basically, I shouldn't say reprimanded, but told Alex that Councillor Burke that his question to council, which was merely in response to the city solicitor, Mr. Potts, I'm blanking on his first name, but basically the city's lawyer, brought up what happened in 2019, and Alex's questioning along those lines was about liability for if someone is turned away from a shelter that has barriers to entry. What liability does the city hold should that person then go and either be injured in an encampment or pass away on the streets, right? Like what liability does that um, maintain? And then this is specifically in relation to the amendments made of bylaw 075, that the city solicitor brought up the summer of 2019, and in response to, as an example of when there was a lot of people being mobilized to clear the encampments directly outside of my front window, um, uh, that sort of gave rise to the framing of the bylaw as it existed, right? And he was talking about the fact that this is actually in response to county bylaws, right? Like it's bringing us in line with these sorts of things. And then Alex Councillor Burke. Okay, I'm just gonna call them all by their first names, I think. Um, he he asked, well, to city staff at large, he more or less asked, like, well, does city staff think that that was a good approach? Because we're finding ourselves here nearly 4 years later, and does city staff think that was a good approach? And then there was like just silence, and then he asked it again. There was more silence, and then finally, Mayor Leal kind of stepped in and was like, "That's a very inappropriate question. You know, like if you want to talk about public policy, we can talk about public policy, but that's not. This is not the time or place, and that was an unfair question to ask city staff." And Al's Councillor Burke's response was, "Well, they brought it up, so I'm just curious if they still think that was a reasonable approach." Um, so it was a little testy, a little bit of drama, but it's kind of the way things work.
Yeah, at this point, this is when I really wish we had like the videos
Yeah,
recorded. Just I would love to like watch back that moment. If you say silent, it was like just like dead silence in the room,
yeah,
as you say. Yeah, that
yeah.
sounds like really tense. And eventually, Councillor Alex Birk, withdrew the question
Withdrew the
as
question. Yeah,
well.
yeah. And
Um,
I was like, besides city staff, I was the only person not who isn't employed by the city in that room too. I was just
okay.
sitting there with my laptop taking notes, like, oh yeah. But it was an
Wow.
interesting moment. It's rare that you get a sense of most of council is so dry, so it's very, very boring. But sometimes it gets a little spicy, and
Okay.
that
Yeah.
was an instance where it did. Yeah.
And I don't really understand why it's an unfair question. I mean, I feel like it's unfair because it's so dumbfoundedly obvious on its face. It's like,
Mhm.
hey, it's unfair to ask anyone such an obvious question when we obviously know that the answer is no, it was not effective. The
Yeah,
problem
yeah,
has
yeah,
got
yeah.
worse
Yeah, it was
since
entirely rhetorical.
2019.
Yeah,
Yeah.
entirely rhetorical.
Is that's why it's unfair? And then if it is so unfair that is because it's so obvious a question, then why are we continuing down this road? Right? So
Yeah,
I think this is
exactly.
actually one of those instances where like silence is golden in the
Yeah.
sense that it's giving us so much information based on what is not allowed to be said, maybe.
Yes. Yeah,
Or
exactly.
at least in the sense of like, oh, we need to conduct ourselves with decorum. How dare we question the exact thing that is like feeding into the problem that we're trying to solve. And it's like, oh, okay. So that was really interesting. In other news, we have to go move on a bit quicker because our boy Matt Crowley is coming on
Yes.
in a little bit. So there were some community grants that got approved. Was that part of this council session?
It was indeed. Yeah, so more or less, yeah, the community grants project, which is which has been ongoing for a number of years now. Yeah, they handed out a bunch of money to some really important community groups, and so things like the Reframe Film Festival, the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center, Kawartha Youth Orchestra, Elizabeth Fry, all of these organizations. Shout out also to Trent Radio Sadler House, Public Energy, Art School of Peterborough. A lot of really, really fundamental and amazing groups within the city received some funding. There was a little bit of discussion in terms of maybe from some groups who didn't receive some of this funding that have in the past, and so there were some questions specifically from Joy LaChica about maybe introducing a motion to have the committee reconsider. Ultimately, that was kind of um, set aside because there is an appeal process. So this will be kind of an evolving story to see if any of the groups who did not receive funding that they may have been depending on based on their previous access to the funds
Okay.
will they might come forward and make an appeal to council and the committee overseeing this. But the chairs of this committee were Alex Burke and Keith Real. So that's an interesting
Okay.
point as well. Yeah.
Good to know. Yeah, it seems like, hey, this is like actually a great kind of use of money. There were a lot of like arts and culture
Hmm.
kind of institutions on this list. A lot of like environmental campaigns,
Yep.
heritage, social services, even some sports. So it is
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, it's a total of $169,000 and change, and it doesn't seem like that much in reality. Like this is doing a lot to kind of like boost arts and culture in Peterborough. So I'm kind of happy to see something like this happen. I guess that there was more funding for initiatives like this. I noticed that the Peterborough Politics podcast was not on the list.
It was not. I think we may have missed the funding window there. There's always
Okay, yeah.
there's always next year. There's always
We
next
didn't
year.
apply, so
We
that
didn't
probably
apply.
explains it. I was wondering if you know how people can apply, or if I don't know. Yeah, do you know how people can apply, or is it just something we need to watch out for?
I believe it would be posted. I don't know the exact details, although I'm as a member of the Trent Radio Board of Directors, I can um figure it out. And because it's something that
Okay,
I'm interested in, because these I imagine that these would have been put in before I started covering council. So and this was all in line with the budget as well. That was passed, right? So this is funding that had been previously allocated towards this, and so they have a set amount of funding that they then use to divide up amongst everyone. So I don't know exactly how one applies, but if my experience
okay.
applying for like committees and things like that, municipal committees, is any indication, there's probably a tweet that's sent out, and then you go and you fill it all out.
Sure, sure.
But I can get more
Somebody in chat
details.
is saying, because we are operating, as a community,
Hmm.
that city grants open every November and close in the first week of December. So thank you so much for
Okay,
sharing that.
that's wonderful
Someone else is
information.
saying that Quilts for Cancer in Peterborough got some funding, which I'm really happy to hear because they gave me a quilt when I was going through cancer,
Oh,
and it's
that's amazing.
probably one of the most beautiful blankets that I will ever own, and I will always cherish that. So shout out to Quilts for Cancer.
Yeah, a lot of really deserving groups got funding. It really is kind of a this is a nice piece of council news. Supporting some
Yeah,
really really important groups. Yeah,
some happy vibes, and of course,
yeah,
since it's a happy piece, we don't have much time for it, and we need to move on.
yeah. Of course. Yeah, rapid fire,
um,
rapid fire. Let's go.
that's right. So, Reem Ali, who
Yes.
is Peterborough's first municipal DEI advisor and is notably a Muslim woman,
Yes.
presented to City Council a new overarching equity plan. Now, if you've been following our show or city politics at all, you might remember that back in February, Joy LaChica made a motion to immediately do more in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but that motion was deferred so that council could hear from advisor Reem Ali. So we have finally heard from Reem Ali, and what did Reem Ali have to say? Do you know?
Yeah, so she kind of gave a little snapshot of some of the work that she's been doing since she started in her position in July 2021. At that time, she was brought on as a for a 2-year contract, but that's since been made a permanent position. That's also when her title became diversity, equity, and inclusion advisor as opposed to officer.
I see.
Yeah, so she gave.
Is it because of the stigma around the word officer?
I didn't ask specifically why it changed, but that
Okay.
it
Okay.
kind of it's in the back of my mind.
Sure.
Yeah, so she gave an overview of some of not necessarily in response to the motion, however, in the report by city staff concerning Reem's presentation, um, they talk about the fact that this motion could be brought back up. It didn't end up being brought back up because I think uh, uh, Reem Ali did a really good job of explaining the ways in which race and cultural identity are weaved throughout the community safety and well-being plan, which was the main impetus behind Joy's Councillor LaChica's motion. So more or less what came of this was just sort of a conciliatory understanding that there's a lot of work being done on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And to echo a sentiment that I say every single week here on this podcast, and was said by Reem Ali herself, this is very slow work, right? she kept reiterating that point, that nothing happens quickly when it comes to this, but there is tangible progress being made. And she made a very good case for she was very thankful for the opportunity to appear before council. This is the first time that she's come before council in almost 2 years, which is that's quite a lot. I believe it was December 2021 was the last time that she appeared before council. So this
Okay.
is definitely something that needs to occur more often, so that not only councillors and staff are more aware of the work that's being done on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also so that we as citizens are more aware of the work that's being done sort of behind the scenes, and isn't really getting the attention that it really deserves. I mean, if Joy La Chica wasn't fully understanding of some of the things that has been going on, then how can we as citizens be made fully aware of some of the work that's being done as well? There's always more work to be done, and of course that's what Reem Ali was talking about as well, right?
Okay. And so did did Joy La Chica's motion pass now?
They didn't revisit it. They ended up just saying, Joy spoke to the fact that once she had met with Reem Ali a number of times and reread the community safety and wellbeing plan, and she held up a physical copy, and she'd earmarked all the places where something related to race or cultural identity or diversity, equity, and inclusion were integrated in the plan. She said, my concerns have been allayed through discussion, right? Through communication, through learning more, through asking more questions of more people, which kind of, again, speaks to sort of like, I mean, the whole instance with Dave Hakey was an interesting example of like the necessary nature of diversity, equity, and inclusion training for city staff, but it also just it doesn't it's kind of, it didn't really amount to anything beyond the fact that now it is essential for city, well, not city staff, but councillors to undergo training. There was a question brought forward, I believe it was Councillor Baldwin, who asked Reem Ali about the nature of the training, whether it would be one-on-one or in small groups, or how it would happen. And she confirmed the fact that when this training does occur, it will be all councillors and the mayor in the same room, and sort of going through some of these more difficult discussions, which was interesting to hear. And yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
council is going to have to go through a DEI type of training?
Yeah, so that was one of the motions that was passed in relation to Dave Hakey's I'm not going to apologize statement, right? Councillor Burke
Right.
introduced a motion which ended up passing. Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. All right. Well, it would be great to one day maybe even talk to Reem Ali on this show. You never know, I guess, who might be interested on coming in the future. We are going to take a very quick break so that we can get Councillor Matt Crowley on the podcast. So we have some more original music from the Garbageface. So we'll be taking a moment and we'll be right back. Which is
hello.
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 How's it going?
How's it going?
Good.
good.
What's up?
Not much. How you doing? How are you guys?
We're doing well.
We're good. Really love like the art vibes you got going on your wall.
Yeah,
there.
I was going to blur the back of my screen, but I'm like, you can still see this and this, so it wouldn't have made a difference anyway.
Does it recognize the faces?
Yeah, bit of a Beatle fan, so
yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I was gonna ask. I wasn't sure if that would be too on the nose.
Yeah.
I love it. That's great.
Good. Thanks.
Awesome.
You guys had a good discussion?
Yeah, we did. Have you been watching so far, or
I haven't? I just actually got back, so I sort of rushed on technical difficulties. So yeah.
Okay. Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience as well? They're going to ask you what your pronouns are, so you should definitely include that.
I'm Alex Burke. I am. Sorry. I'm Matt Crowley. I am the Peterborough Councillor from Monaghan Ward. Pronouns are he and him.
All right, awesome. And you are a new councillor.
Brand new, yeah.
How long have you been in the position now?
Well, I mean, I guess the election was end of October, so God, 5 months, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, how are you finding it so far? Like, is it difficult to kind of start learning the ropes, or is there anything you would like to convey to us about like your experience?
Well, I mean, as someone who's not very familiar with politics, I mean, parliamentary politics especially is a completely different animal, and trying to wrap my head around sort of the procedure of council is the toughest one. I know that I think Sebastian will remember a couple weeks back when I had to actually chair a meeting, and I mean it was probably my third or fourth actual council meeting, so I was still trying to learn, everything directs through the chair, and is there a motion, and if there's a motion, do you have a seconder? And I mean, I was mortified. So yeah, I mean it's really interesting. It's the most interesting thing that I've ever done. But I love it. I absolutely love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you did a great job that night. You did a very good job of playing it cool and asking for help, which I think is
I'm a good
thing.
actor.
Yeah, very very good.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing in the world. Yeah, for sure. But yeah.
Okay. I guess I want to ask you, like, what was your campaign like, or were there any challenges that you found when you were campaigning to become a councillor?
I mean, the only challenge was trying to find the time to actually get out and door knock. I know that from talking to previous councillors, previous mayors, current councillors, current mayors, it was the thing was you have to put in the work. That was the mantra. So I had to get out and door knock as much as I could. So I'm one of the few councillors that have a full-time 9 to 5 job, and it was a lot of lunch hours during the week. It was all day Saturdays. It was Sundays. It was evenings. It was weekends. It was the odd holiday. But yeah, it was just trying to find the time to actually get out and do it was huge. That was tough, but I made it work, and I'm lucky that I work for a company and work with people that are very understanding of the situation, and we're very happy that I was sort of putting myself out there to do it. So yeah, so they were on board and allowed me a little bit of freedom and leniency to make it happen. So it was good. Yeah, but that was the only challenge, just the timing.
Right. I guess that is what we have heard talking to some other politicians, is that, like, well, it's city councillor is only a part-time job.
It is.
Are you finding that that's true?
Yeah, it's I mean it's technically a part-time job, but it is full-time. I mean, there's always emails coming in. There's always responses that you have to give. There's always people who have a problem, and it could be something like garbage. It could be something like snow removal. It can be anything. So, and it'll happen at any time. And so you have to be sort of available. It's the good thing about having 2 councillors per ward, I guess, is that it allows, if something happens that I can't get to something right away, possibly my ward mate may be able to get to it as well. So, but no, I'm constantly sort of monitoring my phone and my communications to see if I've got anything, and sometimes I just can't, because of the job. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something that maybe not a lot of people would know, and it's worth saying that you have to answer all of your emails. It's not like you have a staff who will respond to these emails for you, or and that's something that I talked to a lot of with when I was interviewing the mayoral candidates. Stephen Wright brought that up especially. about like wanting to make it very clear that when he as a councillor, he has to respond to all of these emails, right? And so
That's right.
people were getting, and rightfully so, a little bit upset about the fact that councillors weren't responding as quickly as they wanted to.
Yeah.
But it's perhaps because of the fact that they don't know, or they might just assume that you have someone there to write your emails for you, but you don't. It's you, right? Or your ward mate.
You're right. And I remember talking to former councillor Henry Clark, and I ran into his wife, Donna, and, you know, she said there were multiple times where, because he gave out his personal home phone number because he didn't, you know, at the time have sort of the cell phone thing. So he had his personal home phone number on as a contact on his website. So when she would answer the phone, people would think it was his secretary. And yeah, they would give her the gears and yell at her and scream at her. So it was, so now we each have sort of a personal cell phone that connects to us. And if I can get to it, I can get to it. And if not, then it rings, goes to voicemail, and pretty good about getting back to people quickly. It was the one thing that I was told by some of the other councillors previously, and some of the other mayors, is that, you know, you don't ignore emails and you don't ignore phone calls. You know, it's even if someone's really upset, then it doesn't matter. You got to call them back, right? That's what you're there for. So yeah,
of course. I remember calling Henry Clark during the campaign on his home phone.
Oh yeah,
that was the
Very
only
nice.
number I had, and his family voicemail picked up. It was kind of interesting. I did a phone interview with him over his home phone.
Nice.
So I know all too well. Yeah, and it's I mean, it's not fair to for people. It speaks to some element of the society that, you know, it must be his secretary.
That's right. Yeah.
Brutal.
So I mean, there was a big discussion on Reddit the other day about the compensation for city councillors and what they get paid, and some people were saying that they should get paid more because of the amount of work that they do, or maybe it would somehow invite sort of better people to come out and run. But you know, it's a part-time job essentially, and it's as much work or as little work as you want to make it, is what I was told. So, you know, you could definitely have a city councillor who will answer no emails, answer no phone calls, and you know, just show up to the meetings, not do the research, and, you know, not attend boards or committees or anything like that. And that's the other thing too, is that I don't think people realize that with city councillors, you know, social services chair is the portfolio that I was given, along with public library, ag society, and what's the other one, museum and archives. So each one of those come with specific meetings. Social services especially comes with another set of meetings because it's a very large portfolio. So on top of working 9 to 5, having a family, answering constituent emails and phone calls, and then attending all these meetings, and then preparing for the city council, there's a ton of work that needs to get done. So you know, I wonder if that's maybe one of the I'm sorry if I'm talking a lot, but I wonder if that's one of the reasons why, you know, historically you see mostly possibly older people, possibly retirees. You know, we have that sort of vision of politicians being sort of the old white guys, right? And I'm wondering if you see sort of older people do it, because as you get older, you get to the position where maybe you're retired and you can actually afford the time to run for office and devote all your time to that position. Whereas someone who's younger, you've got a lot on the go, especially if you have families and jobs and bills and stuff like that. So yeah, so it's a lot of work. But to answer your question, Danny, yes, I love it.
All right, amazing. We have some people in chat who are saying that they appreciate your presence on Reddit, so maybe they are referring to that conversation. Someone else wanted to specify that Councillor Alex Burke also has a full-time job, so you might not be the only one.
And I don't want to diminish anything else that anyone else is doing. I mean, Alex works, Kevin Dugay works, Dave Hakey works. I mean, Leslie Parnell has a job. So I mean, they all work. I just mean, I have a clock in for 8 o'clock in the morning clock out at 4:30 sort of thing. And if my
Okay.
full-time job takes a little bit longer, it's like, well, then I have to stay. I have sort of set hours. That's all I meant. So not to
I see.
diminish anything else. Yeah, absolutely.
You're not living that free and easy artist life.
Yeah.
No,
make
man.
your own hours kind of stuff. But
You're not
Okay.
hanging at the
Yeah.
studio window looking
That's
down on
right.
people in cafes.
That's right.
Somebody in chat also wants to know what issues that you specifically ran on. But before you answer that, maybe you could tell us if it's pronounced Crowley or Crowley, because we were wondering that earlier on in the stream.
Yeah, no, it's Crowley, but
Okay.
I'll answer to either. I mean, as long as it's a nice thing, hey, I'll answer to either, so that's fine. But no, I go by Crowley.
Sure.
So yeah.
All right. Good to know. Good to know.
So what did I run on?
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, I ran on a campaign of specifically sort of trying to put things right, I guess. I don't think it's any sort of, and by that I mean, if you look at sort of the last council and all of the struggles that they went through, it was a very sort of divisive time on council. And this is just from somebody on the outside looking in. I don't know what it was like behind the curtain. They could have all been, sunshine and lollipops backstage, but it did seem very divisive, a lot of arguing. There were sort of, there was infighting during council meetings, and we still see a little bit of that. I guess it's a little bit different, but it was more or less the fact that I thought that I could bring something to council that I think was missing. Possibly somebody who was a bit of a coming from an IT background, and a little bit of project management is thrown in there as well. You have to understand the differences that make up a team, I guess, and that's essentially how I look at city council. Is it is, while it's a board for the corporation of the city of Peterborough, I look at it as we are a team that are basically trying to look at everything that's wrong in the city, which is, higher taxes, infrastructure is a mess. We have a huge homelessness and addiction and mental health problems. We have a downtown that's sort of just falling apart generally. We have a lack of industry coming into the town, which is forcing us to sort of raise taxes. And it's just, everything just seems to be backwards. So that was essentially what I ran on, just sort of bringing a bit of a unique view. And I felt that there were a few people who were on council maybe that had been there for a little bit too long, maybe that maybe it would have been nice to have a fresh voice, somebody who was born and raised in Peterborough, maybe someone who was part of the arts community as a musician and booking bands. Maybe I could bring a different sort of spin on things. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell. And I think it must have worked pretty well, because I think people really sort of got behind me and put me in there, which was really nice of them. So, which I appreciate. So yeah.
Now,
and
obviously,
that was
it's
something.
only. Oh,
sorry. I was just going to say, and the actual physical campaigning, that was something that, that's unlike anything that you'll ever do in your life. I mean, I've never knocked on a stranger's door to try to essentially sell something, and that's what you are during a campaign, is a salesman. But you're selling your brand, you're selling you. And I've never had to do that. And it was the most uncomfortable thing. That first door I knocked on that was the scariest thing in my life, right? Because you are essentially trying to get people to sort of agree with what you want to do in your vision. And yeah, that's a hard conversation to have with someone, but
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's only been like 5 months, as you say, but have you made, do you feel like you've made any progress towards what your vision was?
Right now, it's more or less, the funny thing is, I don't know if politics is like this for other people, but I know for myself, I've reached out to a couple of other city staffers, and I said, I think that we should look at doing this. And they'll say, oh, that's funny that you mentioned that, because we actually have something like this in the works. I'm like, or I'll talk to another city councillor. I'm like, so I'm thinking about bringing a motion that does this. And it's, yeah, you know what? I've actually got something written, and here it is. And I'm like, what? So at the moment, I'm sort of sitting back, taking stock of the situation and sort of trying to figure out my place on council. I'm focusing a little bit on my ward while I'm letting everybody else sort of figure out, what they want to do with the city as well. I know where I want to go, and I think that we're sort of heading that way. And I'm also part of the Peterborough Regional Liaison Committee, which is really nice. And we've only had one meeting, but I think that's a really important committee to be on too, especially when we're talking about sort of the employment lands and getting more land for the city of Peterborough and working with the county to sort of have a great working relationship that I think possibly may have been lacking from the last council. So that's really where I think that we're heading. So I think that's going to be some important conversations that we're going to have. But yeah, so at the moment, there's a couple of things that we're doing word specifically that I think are going to be pretty good. But it's general stuff like traffic lights and stop signs and sidewalks. But yeah, generally for the city of Peterborough, I think that everybody's pitching in and everybody's been really great at injecting their own view into how they think the city should move. And I think that we all agree that we're all trying to steer the ship in the right direction. And it's just how we want to get to the destination that is a little bit different from everyone else. But yeah, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess speaking of that, I do wonder, like, do you have like a political identity? Obviously, municipal politics, they're not like affiliated with specific parties.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if you identify in any way as a certain type of political identity.
I mean, it's, it's a cop out for me to say that I'm a centrist, but I mean, I am definitely a moderate. I know that, people were sort of touting the fact that I'm progressive, but maybe it's just because I am less sort of far askew than some people. But no, I would say that I'm a moderate. I think that the one it's great thing is I can see both sides of every argument, and but yeah, I would say that I'm more of a moderate than a progressive, if that makes sense. But certainly there's a lot of things that I think I would lean more on the progressive side than not. So yeah.
Well, I'm
But I don't know.
You're kind of confirming.
You tell me when I am.
That had someone asked me, and it's not really my place to say, but having watched you watched all of council, but specifically paying attention, I feel like I've noticed that when you don't always speak up in meetings, but when you do, it's always like enlightening, because it's shining light on a specific, like, for clarification mostly. And I think that's really, really refreshing, because it speaks to the fact that our councillors are oftentimes not career politicians. Like, you are brand new to this, right? So you're asking questions that are going through my mind, right? And I really, really appreciate that. But then also paying attention to the way in which you're voting alongside the more progressive candidates more often than not as well.
Yeah.
Right, around social issues, which is it's just very interesting to watch the dynamics of council kind of develop as from like the very beginning of the new council, and then to see it's been great to watch your role on council kind of develop in that respect.
Well, thanks.
As well.
I know that it's I'm sort of trying to not make it, well, I'm not trying to do anything, but I know that there's a lot of people that think that there's a voting sort of block. It's like 8-3, and it's Joy, Alex, and myself. And I think even Alex has a few times, Alex and Joy have voted, against one another as well. So I don't think that there's, whatever Alex says, Matt's on board, or whatever Joy says, Matt's on board. You know what I mean? It's, but certainly there have been times where I've been on the other side, but I mean, it's just a lot of what they say makes sense. But, I think that there's a few issues that fairly quickly are going to, I think, really divide council. And I think that it comes around, it surrounds sort of the homelessness issue, and I think that we're starting to see that. And, God love him, Alex is really trying his best to make sure that the people who need the help most are getting the most help. And I think sometimes how that comes across during council meetings might sort of make some of the other councillors, get their backs up a bit, but but yeah, so
Yeah,
yeah,
it's been something we've talked about here, because I mean the first two, which ended up being the last two meetings of 2022,
yeah,
were very much about the issue of homelessness and
yeah,
the series of motions that were brought forth by Alex in regards to those, right? And all of them were struck down, and it kind of like playing
yeah,
like the longer game to finally during the budget process get the reallocation of the
yeah,
funds for extra staffing at the
yeah,
two shelters, right?
yeah,
And so oftentimes I feel like, and I'm sure that you're beginning to feel this as well, being like literally on council,
yeah,
but when we if we get our backs up in certain instances and forget to see like the larger picture, that
yeah.
eventually something good might come. It just might not be at this particular moment, right? And that's been really difficult
That's
for me
it.
because I want everything now too, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So I in my writing and coverage of all of this, I need to resist that. So it's been a huge learning curve for me, because my
yeah.
first council meeting was your first council meeting,
That's
right?
right. Oh, is that right?
So yeah, no,
See, I
I
didn't
never,
know. I don't know who's there,
yeah,
or
no,
who should be there, right? So,
I'd
yeah.
never covered council before this first sitting of this
Oh, wow.
of this council. So it's been wild for me as well. And
Oh, that's great.
yeah,
Yeah, it did seem like I remember talking to I forget who I was talking to, one of the other counselors, and I said, this whole thing seems, having quorum and making sure that every question is going through the chair, and there's delegations, and this is general committee, which is different from special committee, which is different. There's all
yeah,
sorts of procedures that I'm not aware of. So I remember saying to somebody, I'm going to read as much as I can, read the reports and try to read them in, duplicate, triplicate, just to make sure that I understand everything and vote correctly. But I'm going to shut my mouth. I am not going to wade my toes into, the political waters so much as I'm not going to, start arguments or get into anything big. And I mean, yeah, like Alex right from the get go hopped in, and everybody was talking and everybody
yeah,
was going. I'm like, what is happening? I thought the first couple months was let's focus on the budget and work on that, but it was, yeah, you hit the ground running pretty fast. So
yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
he gave a lot of content to write about those first
he
couple
did.
weeks.
I bet he did.
Let me
Yeah,
tell you. I mean,
yeah, he did.
the first council meeting or I guess it was a general committee meeting, but the first time I
Yeah,
showed up and there's a protest outside, and I'm thinking,
I
wow,
know.
are all council meetings like this? And it turns
Yeah,
out no. Turns
yeah.
out usually it's just me sitting in the audience watching all of you guys work.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So Danny, tell us a bit about yourself.
Oh, about myself?
Yeah,
Well, I
it's
don't
just
know.
been Seabass and me talking for the last.
Oh, no, that's good though. That's good though. I mean, only so
Seabass,
many people can
yes.
talk at once. People definitely hear too much about me already, but
There you
maybe
go.
we could grab a coffee or something sometime
There you go.
and talk it up. But we do, I guess, have another question from
Sure.
chat. It says, ask Councillor Crowley why he voted to possibly put campers in parks in jail for up to 6 months and possibly fine them $10,000. Now, I think this is referring to something back in December. Potentially there was a motion that was putting campers in parks in jail for 6 months and fining them more. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I don't think that it was. I think that what that was, and forgive me if I'm wrong, and if you have it in front of you, you can let me know. But I believe that, I mean, God, there's been so many bylaws and so many things that I've done. If I'm not mistaken, I think that was an amendment to the bylaw that just basically raised the fine. I don't think it was specific to campers. That was already there.
Okay.
So it was specifically addressing, I think, the amount that they could fine someone. And I mean, I don't think I'm an idiot, but correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. But no one is. That's obviously not meant as a device to go into Wolf Street and grab a camper and say, well, now they won't tent because the fine is $5,000. That it was
Right.
just an amendment brought forth to amend that one component. So The whole tenting issue on, for example, on Wolf Street,
Mhm.
is that's already in contravention of a bylaw. So that's already there, and that's not like in December we voted to, oh, now it's illegal to tent on city grounds. Like that was already built into the
Okay.
bylaw. So it was just a matter of the fine, and
And I
yeah.
think
So there
maybe
you go.
some jail time as well.
I don't remember seeing specific jail time in there, but I don't
Okay.
know if that's, I mean, somebody would have to go in and look at the bylaw and see what it states. I'm not completely familiar with all of the parts of the bylaw. So, and if there is
Okay.
jail time for it, I don't know if the trespassing bylaw has a jail time component to it or not.
Sure.
Yeah.
We were
Yeah.
talking earlier on the show about Councillor Alex Burke, who asked
Who?
if this this person we're always talking about.
Oh, that guy, right? Yes.
Yeah. Um and he asked if this bylaw in reference to what is it? 075. I don't know. Yeah, 075.
Okay.
If he thinks that it's something that has been effective, and he was, I think, particularly asking this question about city staff, and there was
Mhm.
this apparently silence moment, and then they were also reprimanded by Mayor Leal, and
Yep.
I'm wondering, like, if you think that this is an effective course of action, and the one that we should be continuing down on.
Do you mean specifically applying the trespassing bylaw to people who are tenting?
Yeah, to Peterborough campers, people
Oh, I see what
campers.
you're saying. Yeah, I mean, there's, as somebody who, well, as the chair of social services, I know that there are, I mean, I don't even have to be a chair of social services to understand that there's a myriad of problems with tenting. Specific to the tenting, um, you know, for the tenters, I know it is incredibly unsafe. It's unhealthy. It is, these guys are um, freezing to death or ODing by themselves in tents. It's just not a way to live, right? And then you look at the residents on Dalhousie, and it's an us versus them sort of situation from their point of view. The people who live in Dalhousie absolutely despise having tenters essentially in their backyards. But I think that, going in with the Canadian Army and forcing them out at gunpoint and then taking all their tents and throwing them in the garbage and then putting these guys on the street, which they're already on the street, isn't a solution. Like that's not how you eliminate tenting. So no, I don't think that the trespassing bylaw and applying it to the tenters at Wolf Street is a viable solution. I don't think that's the way that you sort of solve the housing crisis. So we are at a we are. I think that if you have a substantial amount of people tenting in your community, I think it means that there's a failure of the community in some way, and maybe it's the city that's at fault. Maybe it's the taxpayers that's at fault. Maybe it's my fault. Whatever. But there's something that's missing that's forcing them to tent, and whether it's a low barrier shelter, whether it is not enough affordable housing, whether it is no, there's not enough addiction resource, recovery resources. There's so much missing, right? And so all of that goes into play. So no, it's not as simple as going in and taking away their tents and saying on your bike. That's not going to solve the tenting problem, because then what will happen is you'll see more people tent at Victoria Park, Millennium Park, Lions Park. You'll see them go to Jackson Park. They'll just spread into the woods. So it's not fixing the problem. Plus, a lot of what the homeless people in our community need, a lot of these services are downtown. So you can eliminate all the tents you want, but it's not going to fix the fact that we have a severe problem with marginalized people in Peterborough who have to be down there because that's where they get their Ontario works, that's where they eat, that's where they sleep. So yeah, so no, long story short, no, the trespassing bylaw by itself is not a solution to our housing crisis. And the other thing about that too is that I know that there were a few times where people will, and I'll see it on Twitter, and I'll see people tweeting like, everybody get down to, you know, the Real parking lot right now because the city's come in and they're taking all the tents apart. And I think that that's a bit of a confusion as well. That because I talked to social services about it, and what happens is, and I think they have outreach workers that go down there. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think they go down there daily, and they sort of check in on people. But usually, what happens is if they can have, so they have Jim sleeping in the tent. If they can house him or put him in a shelter or get him the help that he needs, that tent is now vacant. They don't leave that tent there. The city will then take that tent away. So if you ever do see, you know, a dump truck there, they're not going to forcibly evict somebody out of a tent and then like just, you know, all right, we're gonna wrangle everybody up, throw them in jail, find them $5,000 and take away your tents. Like, that's not going to happen. So yeah.
I mean, it does, I mean, seem to be happening though. Like whether it's in Peterborough or Toronto or across Canada, it does seem to be something like you say, hey, that person has found shelter or a house, but you know, you can keep a tent in your house if you
Oh yeah.
there's no need to simply just like pick it up and throw it in the garbage. And often we've heard the stories. If it's not perfectly documented in Peterborough, then maybe elsewhere, that this is unfortunately kind of what's happening. And you say you don't support the Canadian Army, but I mean, it is police and city staff, and now we are saying you know, private bylaw enforcers. So I'm wondering, like, do you think that this switch to private guards is going to also make any difference?
So the private law enforcement that we have is meant to replace policing, the police services, essentially because the police have, and I think, I'm not sure if you watched the Chief Betts give a speech, and he said they're reworking their policing act to bring it more in line with other communities and other municipalities, including the elimination of the police specifically enforcing bylaws. And not just the trespassing bylaw, but that could mean like the noise bylaw, that could mean animal control, it could mean a lot of other things. So if you have a bylaw issue, instead of calling the police, you call municipal law enforcement. So I think that seems to be where some of the enforcement, you know, parking, etc., is moving to in Peterborough. We still have the police, but if you call them and say that there's a guy who is running through the backyard and he's you know, digging up my flowers or something like that, you would probably have to call municipal law enforcement, right? Or there's somebody parked in my driveway and he's blocked it off, municipal law enforcement. So that's, so the private security isn't so much that you know, now we have to get private security to handle our homeless problem. It's, we have to have you know, municipal law enforcement anyway, because you know, we need it. So that's essentially it.
I guess I just am a bit confused there, because I feel like municipal law enforcement sounds like something that would be part of the government or employees of the city, but these are private guards. Like this is being outsourced. So is that
oh yes, sorry, yep,
different?
Yeah, that is right. Yeah, I think that we have a private security firm that we hire to monitor the parks. I believe that's what it is, and I could be wrong, and I can get back to you on that. But yeah, okay. I know that's I'm positive that's what it is, because I think that caused, you know, the fact that we sort of had to have private security caused some consternation between some among some of the other councillors, that it was like, why are we paying for a private security firm when we have, you know, when we're paying so much money to the police? You know, that was sort of the thought. So
right, that's definitely my thought, is that well, if we're doing municipal law enforcement and private enforcement as well, then surely we're defunding the police because they're not doing as much work, right? But no, it's quite the opposite.
It's both
we're giving the police more money in addition to these more policing, like in other forms as well.
Well, and if I can cut in, I know that Chief Betts had a great presentation, and one of the things that was highlighted was the fact that we have a vast amount of calls that go unanswered. We have a large amount of crime in the city, and it might not be serious violent crime, but we do have, you've seen it where people are, it happened to me on Saturday where somebody came and they were walked up my driveway and started trying to get into my car, shining the flashlight, and if I was awake, it's like, oh, please come and help, right? And they get a lot of those calls, and some of those calls are lower on the totem pole, I would imagine, because they have more violent calls, or consequently they might have calls related to maybe overdoses or things like that as well, which then you get paramedics and fire and all of that as well. So I think that it's their whole movement away from bylaw enforcement is also to address the fact that a lot of these calls just go unanswered and they can't get to all of those calls. So if they can focus on the more serious ones, well, the city can actually focus on bylaw enforcement and I don't want to say the less serious ones, but the ones that maybe we don't need a police sergeant to go out to. So maybe that's sort of a better idea, I guess. But hopefully it means a decrease in crime over the next few years, but we'll wait and see.
Okay. So, Sebastian, did you have a question? I felt like I interrupted you there.
Oh no, I was just going to say something that I brought up earlier is possibly like the reason behind and I mean we can bring all sorts of biases into this, but it's like like I know that the police budget has a certain set amount of money that's designated for it, right? And there's contingencies for if they have emergencies like what happened last year and everything like that.
Yeah.
But it strikes me that it's possibly cheaper to hire a private security firm rather than to employ police officers, right? When they do have that budget already. It is, I mean, it's good that the police aren't being called to things that the police don't need to be called to. I think that at the end of the day, that might be a silver lining on what is a sort of unsavory issue to kind of delve into, right? Like nobody likes to talk about these kinds of things, right? But it's kind of the lived reality in the city, and I think it speaks to like sort of what you've said about like there's something going wrong in the city at some level somewhere that is kind of underpinning a lot of these issues, right? Like people don't go out and commit petty crimes for fun. I mean, some people do. Maybe some of us did when we were teenagers, but most adults will. It's not out of on a whim that people are committing petty thievery or committing assaults or things like that. That there's an issue stemming from something, and it's a social issue that needs to be addressed, right? And I think a lot of people would probably say that hiring, that the money could be reallocated towards something other than private security firms to sort of address that issue. However, it has to be like a multifaceted approach in that respect too, right? Because I mean, I feel like I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, and I imagine a lot of the people in chat would agree, but it's it just I feel like it's important to put that in context as well, right? Like it's part of a solution to a much larger problem, and I imagine some of the frustration that a lot of people might face would be they don't see a lot of it being addressed in ways that aren't punitive in nature, right?
That's right.
That's all I had to say. A little bit of a rant.
I guess my last question on the matter, I guess, is like, who is hiring the security firm? Like, is it the police? Is it City Council? Is it both? Is it a committee? Are you aware of who is hiring the guards?
That's a good question. I don't know. I believe that it would be the city. It wouldn't be specifically City Council saying we need this, so let's do this. I mean, I'm certainly
okay.
We would had to have approved it in the budget, I would assume, but so I would believe it would be city staff that would be responsible for that. Which department, I'm not sure, but
okay, fair enough. And I have a feeling you knew I was going to ask you about this. It was probably my number one issue with City Council is when are we going to get the City Council meetings on YouTube?
Oh yes, good question. And I actually asked that the other, yeah. So I had said that in response to your last, I think it was your last YouTube video, and it was so I reached out to City Clerk John Kennedy, and I'm waiting for an answer because I could swear. And I actually, my first day in council, I was talking to the IT team that was sort of setting up the mics and setting up the cameras and stuff. And I said, hey guys, so how do we get this on YouTube? Wouldn't that be easy? And one of them gave me an answer that was, well, because we use this suite of software that we use for voting and broadcasting online, I think there's a licensing issue. And I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. That it has to be, it can't be rebroadcast or whatever the heck it is. I don't know. But I'm like, it's not the MLB, so we should be able to rebroadcast it if we want to. But it's just a matter of whether or not we can record that stream, and then put it there. So when I asked last week, I still haven't got an answer. That damn clerk, I swear.
John.
John. He's a great guy. But when I asked John, I said, do you know anything about a licensing issue? And just I need to get the answer back and figure what it is. He's like, oh. He's like, I'm not sure. I'll let you know. So he hasn't let me know yet, but it hasn't been too long yet. But I will make a note, and I will, hey Siri, set a reminder to ask John about YouTube.
There we go.
There we
All
are.
right, thank you.
There you go.
Siri is on it, so we're all good. And I guess, I mean, as someone who wants to always be more informed, in part because I'm doing this show, and I'm sure for yourself even, trying to keep up with everything, because now it's literally your job. And like, do you find it hard to kind of access the necessary information? Because I know this week Joelle is spending time with her family as she should, right? And we miss out on all the tweets and maybe a couple articles in the Examiner. And then so it's hard for the average person to then kind of like access this thing. And for me, the website is really hard to navigate as well. The city website, is there any way that we can increase access to this information?
Yeah, I know that the funny thing is I know that anything that anybody needs is on the City Peterborough website. But like you said, I mean, it's a city website, so every department has a page, and every department page has multiple links on it going to another page and a committee and this and that. So it's a beast of a site. In terms of making it easier, it would be a great idea. I mean, hey, people smarter than me have probably worked on the website, but it would make sense to put sort of the some of the quick hits on the front page and say, oh, Mr. Last Council Meeting, click here or whatever. But I know I will reach out to different departments and I'll say, hey, I need the thing about the stuff. Do you have that document? And they're like, oh, it's on the city website right here. Click, and they'll immediately send me a link back. And I'm like, how did you find that? Because I was typing and I can't find
right. I definitely get a sense that you need to know how it works, and I still don't know how it works. So
I mean, it's a major aspect of my job to understand how to work and find things on the City of Peterborough website. But like I said, it's my job to know where to find these things too, right? For my own purposes, so that I can reference things. But like, I feel for the average for people whose job is not, and they just want to be informed, right? Joelle and I can't be the only sources of information emanating from City Hall, and that's because when Joelle goes away, it makes it harder on everyone. It makes it harder on me because I don't have someone to bounce ideas off of in the room, right? Like I can't get immediate like sort of clarification, and I mean, she isn't covering it this week, but like Joelle and I are talking all the time, like back and forth during meetings, making sure that we heard things right. And so it's hard, and especially like I'm emailing the clerks and stuff to make sure that I have a copy of the specific motions that are being passed, because oftentimes they're different than the ones that appear on the initial agenda. Right. And then because I'm drafting an email, I'm missing things. Yeah. Right. So it's a lot. So And then
Yeah.
and then I have like my job as an editor, right, on top of all that, and so I can't get the news out as quickly as I would like.
Right.
And it's a lot,
Yeah.
It's hard.
yeah.
You're right though. Like it is compounds at all these different barriers. And once one of those levels is even like removed or is sick or absent, then it's just like it makes everything else harder as well. Like including making this podcast.
Yes.
It would be great. It would be really great to have everything on YouTube. And I think actually last year, I think I tweeted that at you.
I'm pretty sure we've been talking about this. Yeah.
I think you mentioned it. You're like,
yeah.
how hard is it to have it on YouTube? I'm like, yeah, that's right. Let's get it on YouTube. And it was literally one of the first things I did when I actually went into the chambers the first time. And I was given this, it's a licensing thing. And I mean, well, let's find out. So now I'm following up and waiting to hear back. So
digging a little deeper. That's good.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I mean, even for you, right? To get to watch those meetings back, as you say, you work a full-time job. It's Monday evening. It might be nice to watch some of those back, even for yourself. So
to see what
I
happened.
really wish.
Like
Sorry,
the last
go on.
meeting where there was sort of that little terse exchange between Mayor Leal and Councillor Burke. It's like it'd be like, oh, what happened? I was busy writing something. I didn't see, you could actually go back and see what happened. But
All right, let's make it happen one way or another.
All right, let's see what we can do.
Okay.
We have to now. We've talked about it this much.
That's right. That's right.
That's right.
Tangible action. Tangible
I'll
action.
just have my phone up during meetings, and I'll just like do this, and I'll put it up on YouTube when I'm done.
Yes.
There you go.
At that
POV.
point, you might as well be live on Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram. I was gonna say just Instagram live.
That's it.
Council from Councillor Crowley's point of view.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, we've definitely gone way over time, but I think we'll just have to have you back. Chat had tons of questions. Chat really wanted to grill you and try to hold your feet to the fire here, but I don't think we have time to get to them all, unfortunately. But thank you so much for joining us. You're our first guest on the podcast. So tell your friends, tell the other councillors.
Well, it was great. Yeah. But if you ever want me back, let me know. That'd be great. So
for sure.
Let's get a few more council sessions under my belt, and then then I can come back going, well, now I know everything, and then I can espouse my knowledge.
That's when we'll hold your feet to the fire. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
it's too easy right now for me to go, I don't know. I'll find that out for you. I don't know. So you can only use
typical politician. Just I don't know, but I'll find out. You
can only use that. I'm a new councillor for so long, and then people are like, it's not an excuse anymore.
Yeah, you're right on the probation period. I think about 6 months is when it's like, come on, if I know that, then you should.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know. Talk to Sebastian. He knows.
Yeah, he's there all the time.
That's right.
Hanging out.
That's a better question for the Arthur.
Just another hanger on.
There you go. Well, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
It was
for
a lot
coming
of fun.
on.
Yeah, thanks a lot.